beautiful.
Hello, lovers of the world. This is Sinta speaking. I love The Moving Finger by Agatha Christie. It's definitely my favorite Miss Marple book so far because it ticks all the right boxes for me. I liked it so much that I re-listened to the audiobook after I had first listened to it and realized I actually had so much more to say about this book that I couldn't fit in my last video. Just like my last video, this is less of a review of the book and more like a brain dump of everything that I liked or disliked about the story. This will feature some dissections of the characters and other features of the book that stood out to me. This video is going to be full of spoilers. Read the book first before watching this, or just avoid watching this video entirely if you haven't read the book yet. I did not remember the ending of this book going into it, so I was very excited. It's been a while since I came across an Agatha Christie book that I'm not very familiar with. The plot revolves around Jerry and Joanna Burton. Jerry is injured from a plane crash and is instructed to recuperate in the quiet countryside, and he is accompanied by his younger sister Joanna. They rent a house in a village called Limstock and are slowly integrating themselves into the community. Then it's revealed that poisonous pen letters have been sent to the inhabitants of Limstock, including Jerry and Joanna. One of the poisonous pen letters seems to have caused the death of Mrs. Symington, who is the mother of our other protagonist, Megan Hunt. For the majority of the first act, the police and Jerry are mostly concerned with figuring out who sent the poisonous pen letters and trying to get that person to stop. It isn't until the mysterious murder of the Symingtons' maid that the police and Jerry begin to reevaluate the events. The maid's death is also the catalyst for the vicar's wife, Mrs. Calthorpe, to entreat Miss Marple for help. Therefore, it isn't until 2/3 of the book that Miss Marple actually arrives in Limstock. And by then, all sorts of things have happened to our protagonists. Jerry confesses to Megan that he's in love with her, and Joanna's courtship with Dr. Owen Griffiths reaches its peak. At the end, through Miss Marple's help, it's revealed that the culprit was actually Mr. Richard Symington, who is Megan's stepfather. He was the one who sent the poisonous pen letters to everyone in Limstock so that they would be distracted when he eventually poisons Mrs. Symington and make it look like it was a suicide based on what she read on the poison pen letters. He had also killed the maid because she had inadvertently become a witness, and he tried to kill Megan at the book's climax due to a plan that Miss Marple hatched to make him reveal himself. I figured out the murderer pretty easily, but it's less because of the clues placed in the story and more so out of intuition and based on my ability to recognize patterns in Agatha Christie's writing style. The key is figuring out who is most likely to benefit from the victim's death. And in this case, it was clearly Mr. Richard Symington, the husband. He had fallen in love with the family's governess because she was so beautiful, and he wanted to get rid of his wife so that he could marry her. As far as plots go in the Agatha Christie oeuvre, this is pretty high up there for me in terms of the premise and the execution. The biggest thing I liked about the book, however, was the characters. Even though Jerry was our narrator, I would include Joanna and Megan as protagonists in the story. The three characters each have their own personal struggles, and all three of them undergo the most significant changes by the end of the book. Their relationships with each other and to other people are also very entertaining. It is really sad that everyone native to Limstock seems to not care for or see the potential in Megan. The three people who did, Miss Marple, Joanna, and Jerry, were all technically outsiders to Limstock. I think that was another indicator of Megan's status as a symbolic outsider. She clearly doesn't want to be, though. When Jerry asks Megan why she doesn't just leave, she doesn't want to. Throughout the text, she does not express any particular desire to leave the village or to see the rest of the world like we would expect from somebody who is desperate to get out of the situation. Instead, it's more like Megan doesn't understand why people are not making space for her, why people don't see her, and I think that's the thing that she struggles with the most, not necessarily that she wants to leave the village. So it makes sense that in the end, when Jerry proposes to her and when Dr. Owen Griffiths proposes to Joanna, both siblings who are the real outsiders make their home in Limstock alongside Megan, the symbolic outsider. Hopefully that makes sense. It's interesting that Megan makes her home in Jerry's house, not her family's, thus permanently severing her connection to the past. Another common trait that our three main characters share is that they do not have a job. Everyone else seems to have an occupation: lawyer, doctor, vicar, vicar's wife, governess, housekeeper. Even Amy has things that take up her time. Our three main characters do not. And I want to circle back to that eventually. But first, I'll talk about Jerry since he is our narrator. I'm not really sure what Jerry does for work that he could afford to recover in the countryside and then buy the house that he was renting by the end of the book. We can just infer that he is wealthy. We can also infer that Jerry and Joanna definitely come from the city based on their reactions to being in Limstock. So their adjustment to their new environment is very interesting to me because I too have not spent a lot of time in the English country. So I think that makes Jerry and Joanna both really good reader surrogate because we, like them, are experiencing Limstock and its inhabitants for the first time. I was very fascinated by Jerry's interactions with the townsfolk, who revealed that they're a lot more callous than I or he expected from people who live in a sleepy country village. It contradicts the assumption that people who live in more cosmopolitan urban spaces like Jerry and Joanna are more judgmental, because you contrast that with the locals of Limstock and you're like, oh, actually, the people who live in the village actually feel a little bit more ruthless and mean than you expect. Personally, I thought Jerry was a very likable enough protagonist. He's funny, he's very discerning, quite intelligent enough to pick up the clues of the mystery, and has a decent backbone when it comes to defending other people, particularly Megan. I sort of imagined Jerry to be about 28, which would then make Joanna 22, since the text explicitly states that he is 5 years older than Joanna, and that would make Megan about 20. That is honestly the biggest age gap that I would feel comfortable with. The age gap between Megan and Jerry is already a bit weird for me to swallow, but to be honest, I have seen worse from Agatha Christie, and I tried not to let that get to me because I am a sucker for Christie couples that actually have chemistry. I thought Jerry and Megan were very endearing, both individually and as a couple. However, that doesn't mean that I wasn't reluctant about their relationship. For example, we get lots of instances of Jerry and Megan cheerfully engaging in witty banter. However, even though Jerry kept saying that he saw Megan as a young woman, he also refers to her frequently as a frightened creature or a charming pet or a loyal dog. I didn't pick up on this language on my first read, but on the second read, it was a lot more obvious and apparent than I remembered from the first read. This joke of Megan being kind of like a pet gets turned on its head later on in the ending when both Megan and Jerry are now living together in the house. Megan is gifted a dog from Joanna, and instead of getting one collar, she gets two. She asks Jerry, what do you think the purpose of the second collar is? Jerry says that it's Joanna's idea of a joke. I think therefore implying that Joanna thinks that Jerry is the loyal companion dog in their relationship as a way for her to tease him how much he's fallen desperately in love with Megan. You can obviously also see it the other way around, where Megan is the dog and continues that original analogy of Megan being dejected pet. But I like to view it the first way, where Jerry is the dog and Megan is like the owner. And even if I do think about it that way, the language in which Megan is described in terms of charming pet, frightened creature, etc., is still off-putting nonetheless, considering that not only is there a considerable age gap between Megan and Jerry, there is also the inherent power dynamics of Megan being a 20-year-old woman trapped in a neglectful household, while Jerry has the implied wealth and agency of a man of that time period. I definitely feel that Jerry has been attracted to Megan from the beginning and appreciates her personality and quirks the way that she is. However, I'm not really sure how to interpret his anger at her not dressing like a young woman though. He goes to London to check up with his doctor and on impulse takes Megan with him. He takes her to the store to get new clothes and to get dressed up and styled, basically. One could argue that Megan's stagnant state is the only thing that kept Jerry from pursuing her as a valid love interest, and that's why he felt the need to give her the makeover. I guess I should be happy that he took great pains in making her not look like a child first before pursuing her romantically. I guess. Jerry is not immediately attracted to her in the same way that he was with Miss Holland, but he definitely recognizes her potential and finds her very charming. I felt like the text did a decent enough job highlighting Megan's natural quirks, her youth and inexperience, while simultaneously hinting at her potential to grow up into a sophisticated and good-spirited young woman. She studied in school, she can dance, she can hold her liquor well, and I personally think that she is confident in her own way. She's very self-assured. Megan never really came across to me as feeling sorry for herself. She just seemed like somebody who was stressed out and in a miserable position with no way out and in desperate need of a friend or ally, which Jerry and Joanna were. Megan's stagnant state is not a choice that she makes for herself. It's a reflection of her unhappiness and the result of the lack of care from her family. It is also a reflection of her youth. When she gets the makeover, it's not like her entire personality changes. It's more like a chance to finally blossom and grow up outside of the reach of her parents. So the makeover scene just feels like a Cinderella moment to me, where the makeover is a gift from someone who clearly loves her. Why shouldn't she get to dress up and dance at a nice restaurant with a handsome prince? I think she deserves it. Megan also shows agency by refusing Jerry the first time. She doesn't feel indebted to him for giving her a makeover, which I appreciated. The biggest reason why I didn't really have a problem with the makeover scene is that Megan is never really described as ugly by anyone. It's more so about her behavior that Amy and other people, other inhabitants of the village are really frustrated with. It actually reads more as a failure to perform the femininity that is expected of her. And what's interesting is that femininity means different things to different people. For Jerry, femininity is a conduit for romantic attraction, which is why he gave her that makeover in the first place. What about Joanna? For Joanna, femininity is what gives her her power and her standing. Because of the levels of maturity portrayed in the text, Joanna and Megan seem like there would be a significant age difference between them as well. There's this scene where Jerry and Megan talk about stockings, and the comparison that Jerry makes between how Joanna handles torn stockings is a prime example of how Joanna and Megan are in different stages and places in life. Megan is expected to learn how to darn her own socks and is reprimanded when she doesn't. But Joanna doesn't know how to darn her own stockings either. Instead, she just throws them away and buys new ones. This highlights the unequal class and wealth status that Megan has to the Burton siblings. Even Jerry only realizes that Joanna doesn't darn her own stockings when it's thrusted upon him, thereby showing that he too takes for granted that the siblings can afford to just buy new clothes whenever they want it. I would have liked it if instead of Jerry taking Megan to the London stores, it was Joanna instead, since the store and the stylist that Jerry takes Megan to are Joanna's store and stylist anyway. I understand why they made Jerry be the one to give her the makeover so that the two of them can have a date at the end of the night, but I still would have just liked more moments that hint at Joanna and Megan's friendship. Both Burton siblings are quite protective over Megan in their own way, but I just would have felt more satisfied if the book explored Megan and Joanna's relationship dynamics further. Joanna's guidance towards femininity, however unequal that might have been, would still come from a place of care and understanding and would have been healthier than, say, having Amy as a role model, given that Amy does not like Megan at all. As Amy pointed out, Megan's lack of resources and lack of guidance is a failure on her own mother's part. Amy is introduced to the reader as immediately wanting to control Megan, which I think is very, very interesting. In retrospect, it could be argued that Amy already saw herself as a potential replacement for Megan's mother and is therefore acting accordingly. Circling back to when I was talking about femininity, it seems that for Amy, femininity is about independence and control. Amy is another interesting character to pick apart at. I didn't necessarily like her, but I just like how she has so many interesting bits and pieces that we can take apart. Her character type is a very prominent trope that we see in other Agatha Christie books, namely Lady Westholm in An Appointment with Death, a very busybody woman who's invested in her career and takes pride in not just what she is capable of doing, not just that she can do it efficiently, but also takes immense pride and pleasure in the fact that she can do it at all. Amy is portrayed to be an annoying, smug know-it-all, so it reads as if Christie herself is looking down on feminists like Amy who are very vocally advocating for their right to earn an income, and trying to squeeze as much fulfillment of life as much as they can. Because Amy is written to be insufferable, I feel that the sentiments that Amy is trying to convey about women having initiative and wholeheartedly pursuing a career if they want to is portrayed in a negative light. If we as the reader have already decided our opinion of Amy as judgmental and insufferable, then the ethics and the values that she puts forward in the text are going to be tainted by the reader's opinion of her. Because not only does Amy send a poison pen letter herself, she is also constantly mean to Megan and in extension also to Jerry and Joanna, our main protagonists. I think it would be so interesting to actually talk to an Agatha Christie literary expert and discuss Christie's views on women's rights and women's place in the workforce and how that may have changed over the decades and as societal and political upheavals in England occur. Because thinking about how this was written in like the 1940s or something, that would be like during the war. I'm just so fascinated by this interesting disdain that Christie seems to have for women of this type. But on the other hand, she has so many books of other women in the workforce who are very efficient and competent. And I think it's just a matter of whether or not that character is humble or whether or not that character understands maybe her place in the social hierarchy. Because I'm thinking of other characters like Sarah, the Dr. Sarah from Appointment with Death, and Nurse from Murder in Mesopotamia, who, first of all, both of them are medical health professionals. And Amy herself in the book explicitly states that she would have wanted to be a doctor too. And I'm just thinking about how the difference between how Agatha Christie portrays those other women, not just those two characters that I mentioned, but other women who are in the workforce, like Lucy from 450 from Paddington. Women in the workforce who do earn an income. Like, what's just the difference between them and how she writes Amy in this situation? And I think maybe it just comes down to a matter of what the plot needs, and what the plot needs is an insufferable woman who has drive and ambition, and that wouldn't have worked if that person was just not this specific version of this character. Hopefully that makes sense, but I am just so fascinated by the nuances and Christie's ideas about women working and the working class and stuff, considering that Agatha herself is quite part of the elite society, and obviously her views on work and social status is still very much embedded in the text, even when it's not explicitly delineated. I myself am very anti-capitalist and anti-work, so as much as I appreciated Amy's beliefs about pursuing fulfillment by being busy and being glad that women have the financial freedom and independence from their families as opposed to in the past, I also find Amy insufferable just in a completely different way than probably what the book intended. Amy's views just lean a little too neoliberal for my liking, very much like pull yourself by the bootstraps situation. I believe, similar to Jerry, that our purpose in life is not to work, it's to find pleasure. Therefore, Amy's advocation for this ideology of productivity, not even necessarily for the sake of doing good deeds and being a productive member of society, but just for avoiding idleness, is not really aligning with my personal views. But that doesn't mean that I'm 100% on Jerry's side either, considering that Jerry could afford to indulge in idleness because he doesn't have to work and he's a man. So he doesn't have this complex relationship with work in the same way that Amy will. She is basically dependent on her brother when she doesn't want to be. And I think that's why I appreciated Agatha Christie giving her, as well as Emily Barton, the cruise at the end, where it seems that Amy is just a big fish in a small pond. And not only is her being the chaperone or caretaker for Miss Emily Barton and the cruise, not only will that give her a lot of fulfillment by being busy, I think she also deserves to go out and see the world, and that's an opportunity for her to also grow as a person and also to escape, or rather leave behind, Richard Symington, because Boo, Richard Symington. Circling back to this idea of idleness, like I said, Jerry, Joanna, and Megan are the main protagonists of the book, but they're also the people who gravitate towards idleness the most, as seen in the scene where Jerry shares this replica of a Chinese painting from the museum and Megan's reaction to the photo. It feels like a testament to how Megan and Jerry are compatible as partners. But I want to unpack this a little bit further. Megan, when she comes of age, will gain an income at 21. Since Megan is young and has just finished school, it doesn't really make sense for her to so much about finding an occupation or finding a job because she just finished school, even though she is a young woman. So I feel like it really speaks to how little her parents care for her and want her out of the way, because her parents should know that she gets an income when she turns 21. Them pushing for her to learn a skill isn't really out of necessity, and more so that they just don't want her in their radar. And that also made me realize that Amy's ire against Megan's idleness and overall existence is entwined with her love, with Amy's love for Megan's stepfather, because again, she is still imagining herself to be a potential replacement for Mrs. Symington. So that's why she keeps thinking of ways, get Megan out of the way so that she can have Mr. Symington to alter herself. Amy seems to want control wherever she can, which I understand is just a product of being a woman in a time period where there is already so little control of your life. Even Joanna's desires for control manifests in her pursuit of men. I'm sure Amy already enjoys being the main woman in Dr. Owen Griffith's life. So it's so much more interesting to compare the fact that Joanna is another woman who wants to be the main woman in Dr. Owen Griffith's life, since both women are so different from each other, but in a lot of ways they do share some similarity. I really like Joanna's trope of being this gorgeous, beautiful girl who can basically have anyone that she wants, but chooses to court someone unexpected. In this case, it's the very nerdy, nervous Dr. Owen Griffiths. I did think it wasn't fair for Dr. Owen to yell at her for not knowing how to be a nurse during the event of a medical emergency in the later half of the book. I understand that he was stressed out and maybe he was finally frustrated at Joanna for playing him like a fiddle during their courtship, but my brother in Christ, she is not a nurse. I don't know why you think that she is going to be good in a situation like this. And so I just didn't feel like that was fair. Joanna is not a nurse. Why do you think, even if she did pretend to care about his work, like asking like questions about, you know, specific medical anomalies and stuff, why do you think like there's a difference between somebody who's interested in medical stuff and somebody who is trained to do that medical stuff? And very clearly, Joanna is not a trained professional. So I don't know. I just felt like that wasn't really fair for Joanna. So I finished filming this video, and as I was editing, I realized I have a little bit more to say or comment about the book that I did not originally write in the script. So I just thought I'd tack it on at the end anyway, because this is about the ending of the book when everything has been sorted out. Amy and Miss Emily Barton are on their way to the cruise. Miss Emily Barton is talking to Jerry and she's basically saying, oh wow, isn't it amazing that everything works out for the end? Everyone has a happy ending. You're married, Joanna's married. So I guess things have a great way of working out and stuff. And Jerry is like, 2 people died. And then the next thought that he has was that first is that nobody liked Mrs. Symington in the first place. And second is that the maid was not well liked anyway, and that nobody was going to miss her anyway. I didn't know what to make of it initially until I was editing the video and realized that it's another instance of Christie's classism showing. Both people who died are women. One is a woman of status, which is Mrs. Symington. Mrs. Symington was mean to Megan and was the cause of all of Megan's suffering before Jerry arrived in town. And I think that's why Jerry was able to wave her death off as kind of like a necessary evil. But on the subject of the maid's death, I feel like it's definitely Christie basically saying that a maid's life is not really that important, because one, the maid is just the maid. In the tiny bit of the book where we learn stuff about the maid, there really isn't, like, she's described as very slow and not like a very efficient worker, and she was having troubles with her boyfriend anyway. Considering that this is the inside of Jerry's mind, he is able to negotiate those losses of life because he didn't really know them personally, but I guess people who have died who either are not very well liked in the first place or are the working class don't really need to be thought of or considered in the end if everyone else's happy endings are on the line. Christie, as the author, deliberately put that exchange in. It's just the final insight that we have to Jerry's mind before the book officially ends. If Megan died, he obviously would have cared because he's in love with her, but I guess it's Christie spotlighting human nature in that death or life only matters when we like or respect that person. And I guess Jerry and technically Miss Emily Barton neither cared or respected the maid or Mrs. Symington. Okay, back to the video. So I don't really know how to end this, but those are all of my thoughts regarding this book. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Thank you very much for watching. Let me know in the comments what your thoughts were on The Moving Finger or how this fits into your own personal ranking of Agatha Christie's books. If you want to see more of my work, please subscribe. I post videos about books, movies, and films. All my social media links are down in the description if you want to follow me there, alongside my Ko-fi and Patreon pages if you want to support my work. I can't wait to share my love with you again. See you next time. Bye! I just might love me at night. Can't help myself, hormones are high. Give me more than just some butterflies.